The furry fandom is considered by many people to begin with the birth of Raubrazel. It might not have been called furry yet, and it might not look like anything it does today, but there was a small group of fans on the West Coast who were starting to come together. The ignition that started the fandom was a slow burn. Anthropomorphism, as many people will point out, goes a long way back with human history, and still stands proudly in parts of the world. In the last century and a half, anthropomorphism has grown to find a unique place in entertainment. It created the foundation for this fandom, and that is what today's video is about. Hello, Furs from the web. My name is Scar, and this is the story of the grassroots of furry fandom. Stay tuned. The Industrial Revolution was a definitive period in human history. Many practices became automated and allowed for more efficient production of goods than any time in the past. Among such prestigious inventions such as the typewriter, the Stephenson rocket locomotive, and dynamite, an efficient means to make paper from wood pulp was created with the help of a steam engine. Books, specifically fiction, became much more available to the general public. These early literary works sometimes took the form of dime novels. These were cheap and covered a large variety of different genres such as fantasy, science fiction, and children's media. As literature became more common, there was a rise in demand as well. Some authors became more creative, and the use of anthropomorphic characters began in its first big debut. Humans in storytelling could only cover so much, but mixing in the animal kingdom offered much more variety. Animals could be used to convey different emotions or bring unique characteristics to a character. Moreover, they added more flavor and allowed some stories to stand out among the crowd. In 1865, Lewis Carroll released a novel known as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Another example is the famous Jungle Book, which released in 1894 by Rudyard Kipling. Anthropomorphic literature was being developed for people of all ages. The Island of Dr. Moreau, A Possibility, released in 1896, was the first anthro-narrative written with an adult audience in mind. It covers what would happen if anthro creatures were created in real life, and has a mature atmosphere. Beginning in 1890, Palmer Cox created a child-oriented series named Funny Animal, which today is the earliest recorded use of the term. Once the 20th century came, other media forms appeared, including comic strips and animation. In 1923, Bambi, Eine Lebensgeschichte auf dem Walde, translated to Bambi, A Life in the Woods, was released by Felix Salten. This book would be adapted as Disney's fifth feature film, and one of the first that used animals. It was released in 1942, 1 year after the United States got involved in World War II. World War II was also privy to the Walt Disney war propaganda machine, with many of the iconic characters making appearances. Many became symbols of Americana in the war. Anthropomorphism as an art form for all ages peaked during this time. One of the most well-known adult-oriented anthropomorphic novels released 17 days before the war ended, Animal Farm by George Orwell. Following the years of the war, a much greater emphasis would be put on children's media. In the years after the war ended, this media shifted away from appealing to all ages. Anthropomorphism was targeted almost exclusively to children. In the 50s and early to mid-60s, all animation that featured animals was usually of a lower quality and did not attract the same adult audience that it did before. This lull would not last too long, with the syndication of Kimba the White Lion in the United States beginning in 1966. Also coming from Japan was The Amazing 3 in 1967, created by the same studio that animated Kimba. 1 year later, Robert Crumb's Fritz the Cat indie comic would revive the medium of adult anthropomorphism. 4 years into its run, the series received an animated feature created by Ralph Bakshi. Unhappy with the direction, Crumb killed off the character in the next issue just a few months later. The Air Pirates were a group of cartoonists including Dan O'Neill, Gary Halgren, Bobby London, and Ted Richards. These four, between 1971 and 1972, created many series of pornographic comic parodies of Disney works from the 30s and 40s. Allegedly, he had some of these copies smuggled into a Disney board meeting out of a desire to be sued by them. A lawsuit did come, and it went back and forth for at least 7 years. In 1978, the Ninth Circuit ruled against the air pirates for copyright infringement. The whole event did reinforce the idea, though, that comic serials could combine adult situations and anthropomorphic animals. After the death of Fritz the Cat in 1972, not many anthropomorphic characters existed outside the world of Disney. The same year, Richard Adams released a fantasy novel known as Watership Down. It helped breathe life into anthropomorphism in serious fiction the same way Animal Farm did in the past. In 1973, Disney released the film Robin Hood, which would go on to become a classic for many furry fans. On February 29, 1976, Ken Fletcher and Reed Waller founded a new amateur press association known as Vootie. Vootie was created in the underground comic community and offered a place for artists to experiment with anthros without being approved from big corporations. It was self-defined as the official organ of the Funny Animal Liberation Front. In the early days, Vootie contained little adult material. In fact, a Canadian science fiction fan and artist, Tara Wayne, claimed to write a postcard that stated she was surprised at how little pornographic material was in Vootie compared to other underground comics at the time. This, according to Reed Waller, created a split among contributors who wanted to keep it kid-friendly and people who wanted to draw more adult content. Reed was kinda caught in the middle. At Norris Con 2 in 1980, Steve Galacci entered a painting of a character known as Irma Felna into an art show. This character, who would later become the main character of Albedo Anthropomorphics, was an anthro character in a high-tech, mature military setting. This caught the attention of Reed, and after discussing, he understood a bit more. Despite being for different reasons, he and Steve wanted to grow up with their characters. He favored the idea of bringing more adult material into Vootie. He created one of the most famous titles in the APA, Omaha the Cat Dancer in 1979. Omaha followed the story of a feline stripper. Shortly after that, Vootie lost half of its contributors and the APA began its decline. The APA died in 1983, but two of the former members, Mark Schurmeister and Timothy Fay, went on to create Rarbrezel and opened the doors for the burgeoning funny animal fandom. What a video. It's not this often I get to cover so much in a single video. The funny animal fandom can trace its roots way back to the beginning of anthropomorphism, and I feel it's a part of the history that rarely gets touched on, in the same way anything after the year 2000 does. Stay tuned until next time where I discuss the concept of orphaned characters, and then after that, the next era of furry history. Furries versus the media. Until next time, stay possum.